During a basketball game in 2008, Romechia Sims met James Lee. James was working as a security guard at the event, and after a few exchanged glances, the two started talking. In the following days, they began spending time together and quickly started a relationship. Both lived in Clinton, a small town with just over 40,000 residents, located in the state of Maryland. By the end of 2010, Romechia found out she was pregnant. At the time, the couple's financial situation was not very good. Romechia still lived with her mother, Vantasha Sims, while James shared a small apartment with a friend. Despite this, the couple was happy about the new challenge, and in August 2011, their son, Ji'Aire Lee, was born. Ji'Aire was described as a very active child who loved to play all the time and spend time with his family. In 2013, James managed to rent a two-bedroom apartment in the small town of La Plata, also in Maryland, and the family was finally able to live together. At the time, Ji'Aire was only 2 years old, and his older cousin was his best friend. The two would spend hours playing soccer and video games. The family was very happy in their new home, but in 2014, due to relationship issues, Romechia and James decided to separate. After the separation, Romechia continued living in the apartment James had rented, as she had nowhere else to go. James went back to sharing a small apartment with a friend and helped Romechia with their son's expenses whenever needed. She had a job as a sales associate in a store and was also attending university. Her dream was to graduate one day and become a teacher. Even after the separation, things seemed normal for Romechia. However, sometime later she lost her job, and as a result, she started struggling to pay her bills. Desperation took over because even though James helped, it still wasn't enough for her to support herself and provide the basics for their son. That's when something triggered in her mind, and Romechia began hearing voices. From that point on, her behavior changed. In addition to the voices, she became paranoid, convinced that someone was constantly following her. Many times she claimed to hear the doorbell ring, and when she opened the door, she saw armed people trying to kill her. On one occasion, she called her mother after seeing these people and begged for help, saying they wanted to kill her. Romechia's mother rushed to her daughter's apartment, but when she arrived, everything was normal. There was no one at the door. In another instance, Romechia called her stepfather, claiming there were armed people outside her apartment trying to get her. Her stepfather rushed to the location, but when he arrived, there was no one there. The woman's family even requested security camera footage from the areas around her apartment to see if they could identify these people. However, no one appeared in the footage, clearly showing that Romechia was experiencing hallucinations. In February 2015, Romechia called James, saying there was someone inside her apartment trying to get her. She said a few incoherent things to James, who told her he couldn't leave work at that moment but would call her mother, Vantasha. James then called Romechia's mother, who once again went to her daughter's apartment to check on her. When she arrived, Vantasha saw nothing unusual. There was no one in the apartment besides her daughter and grandson. However, this time, Romechia was acting even stranger than before and took a while to recognize her own mother. Vantasha realized then that her daughter's mental state was serious. She decided to take Romechia to the hospital, where after several tests, she was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and depression. Romechia was given medication and discharged. She was instructed to take prescribed medication daily, as it was the only way to stop the hallucinations. Vantasha knew her daughter needed daily supervision, so she invited her to move back in with her. Additionally, Romechia was unemployed and barely able to pay rent. Since she would need to buy prescription medication for daily use, she would likely struggle even more. Thus, Romechia moved back in with her mother, bringing her son along. At that time, Vantasha wasn't living in a house or an apartment. She was staying at a roadside hotel called Deluxe, located in La Plata. Other residents of the hotel, who were Vantasha's neighbors, reported that after Romechia moved in, she and her mother started arguing frequently. Neighbors said it was common to hear them yelling at each other and that Romechia's son, Ji'Aire, was mistreated. There were even police records of Romechia being violent toward her own mother. However, despite the troubled relationship between them, Vantasha was always willing to help Romechia in any way she could. In February 2015, they had another argument, and this time Romechia decided she would no longer live with her mother. She gathered some belongings, took her son, and headed to the apartment James shared with a friend. Vantasha watched as her daughter got into a taxi with her grandson. Since Romechia hadn't told James about the fight or that she was on her way to his apartment, Vantasha was the one who called him to inform him. However, as the hours passed, Romechia still hadn't arrived at James's apartment. Worried about the situation, James got in his car and retraced the likely route the taxi had taken from the deluxe hotel to his apartment. That's when he discovered that Romechia had suffered a hallucination and believed someone was chasing her. During this crisis, Romechia opened the taxi door while it was moving and jumped out with her son. James found her wandering aimlessly near a highway carrying Ji'Aire with her. It was already nighttime and the weather was freezing. Ji'Aire was barefoot, wearing only a thin fabric pajama and shivering uncontrollably. James found Romechia's purse and other belongings further down the road. After that, he took Romechia and their son to the hospital to make sure they were okay. At the hospital, Romechia was given medication for her schizophrenia, and it was confirmed that she hadn't been taking her prescribed meds for a long time. After this incident, James realized that Romechia was becoming a danger to both herself and their son. So in March 2015, James decided to file for full custody of Ji'Aire, arguing that Romechia was mentally unfit to care for the child. The hearing to settle the matter took place the following month in May 2015. During the hearing, James noticed that the judge wasn't taking his concerns seriously, despite him proving that Romechia had been hospitalized twice due to her schizophrenia, both times while Ji'Aire was with her. The judge simply ruled that both James and Romechia were fit to take care of Ji'Aire. As a result, James had no choice but to agree to a shared custody arrangement, where Ji'Aire would spend 1 week with him and 1 week with Romechia. On May 18, 2015, Romechia stopped taking her medication again. Later, she would say that she stopped because she felt the meds weren't working, so there was no point in continuing to take them. Romechia's mother didn't realize that her daughter had stopped taking her medication, and by the time she did, it was already too late. Romechia began hearing voices again and experiencing intense hallucinations. On May 20, 2015, she started speaking incoherently, claiming that some people had come to the hotel, given her and her son a pill, and that they both had taken it. That same day, Romechia told her mother she was going to the pharmacy to get some medicine for Ji'Aire, who had a slight cold. She said she would take Ji'Aire with her because after the pharmacy, she planned to stop by a fast food place and then take him to a park. Romechia arrived at the park with her son around 11:15 a.m. She placed him in one of the swings and started pushing him. As the hours passed, night began to fall, but Romechia still hadn't returned to the hotel. Worried, her mother called to check if everything was okay. Romechia answered and assured her that everything was fine and that she would be back soon. Vantasha waited for her daughter to return, but she never showed up. The next day, May 21st, Romechia was still missing. Concerned, Vantasha called James to inform him about the situation. James then tried calling Romechia. He was already planning to contact her since he was supposed to pick up Ji'Aire that weekend to stay with him for the following week. However, Romechia didn't answer any of James's calls, which made him extremely worried. The next day, May 22nd, a Friday, a man walking through the park noticed something very strange. This park was the same one where Romechia had taken her son. The man realized that Romechia had been there with Ji'Aire since the 20th, meaning for 2 days straight. He noticed this because he walked through the park almost daily and found it strange to see the same woman with the same child in the same spot for so long. Concerned, he decided to call the police to report the situation. When officers arrived to check on them, Romechia was still pushing Ji'Aire on the swing. It was freezing, less than 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and Ji'Aire was completely still. As the officers approached, they quickly realized that the little boy was no longer alive. According to reports, Romechia had been pushing her son on the swing for 2 days straight. When questioned, she explained that voices had instructed her to keep pushing Ji'Aire until someone else arrived to take him off the swing. She claimed the voices warned that if she removed him herself, something terrible would happen. Following these instructions, she kept pushing her son until a passerby noticed and called the police. When Ji'Aire's father and grandmother learned of the tragedy, they were devastated. James couldn't stop thinking that if the judge had granted him full custody, this would have never happened. Ji'Aire's body was sent for autopsy while Romechia was taken to a hospital for evaluation. The autopsy report confirmed that Ji'Aire died from dehydration and hypothermia. When the story reached the media, many people found it hard to believe that a mother had actually pushed her son on a swing for 2 days straight. The case was described as both heartbreaking and bizarre. Ji'Aire was only 3 years old and was laid to rest a few days later in a ceremony attended by family members. Romechia Sims was kept in a hospital until her trial. The trial took place in February 2016, where Romechia pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter. However, the judge ruled that she could not be held fully responsible due to her mental condition. A mental health expert who evaluated Romechia confirmed that she suffered from a severe illness and was unaware of her actions on the day of the tragedy. As a result, the judge ordered her release under strict conditions, including continued mental health treatment. If she fails to comply, she will be hospitalized and could be sent to a psychiatric institution. She is also prohibited from being near any child without adult supervision and must undergo regular evaluations to ensure she is taking her medication. According to sources, Romechia frequently visits her son's grave, bringing toys and singing songs to him.